There are certain things in Christian life that we don't really need to be told to do. It's in the new nature that we have that we ought to do them. But although that is the case, we still have the old nature within, and so we actually do need to be reminded. Now we're going to read a little about this from 2 Corinthians chapter 1, chapter 9, verses 1 to 5. For as touching the ministering to the saints, it is superfluous for me to write to you. For I know the forwardness of your mind, for which I boast of you to them of Macedonia, that Achaia was ready a year ago. And your zeal hath provoked very many. Yet have I sent the brethren, lest our boasting of you should be in vain in this behalf, that, as I said, ye may be ready, lest haply if they of Macedonia come with me, and find you unprepared, we, that we say not ye, should be ashamed in this same confident boasting. Therefore I thought it necessary to exhort the brethren, that they would go before unto you, and make up beforehand your bounty, whereof ye had noticed before, that the same might be ready, as a matter of bounty, and not as of covetousness. We talk about selective hearing, hearing things that we want to hear, and zoning out what we don't want to hear. When we were children, we were particularly good at that. Mother might have asked me to do a task about the house, and with a quick yes, I continued on with what I was already doing. A few minutes later, the procedure was repeated, but maybe the third time or fourth time, when reminded of the consequences of non-compliance, I was moved into action. Now, on account of the fact that the Corinthians had for some time intended to send relief to Jerusalem, Paul pointed out that he didn't need to inform them about it. It is superfluous for me to write to you in verse 1. Indeed, Paul shared their intention with other believers, the forwardness of your mind, for which I boast of you to them of Macedonia in verse 2. The result of that had been that those other believers also wanted to send relief. Your zeal hath provoked very many in verse 2 again. Paul didn't see the need to go on writing about making a contribution, but he obviously had a concern. So what was that concern? They were just like me as a child. They had said yes, but they hadn't actually done yes. So Paul explained to them that he was going to come to Corinth, and in all probability there would be Macedonian Christians with them. If they of Macedonia come with me in verse 4. See, the fact of the matter was that if some Macedonians came with Paul, it would be embarrassing all round if the Corinthians had nothing ready to go to Judea. We, that we say not ye, should be ashamed in this same confident boasting, also in verse 4. The Corinthians would be embarrassed or ashamed, deservedly so. But Paul would also be ashamed after all his confident assertions about the Corinthians, because their stated intention had spurred on the Macedonians. So in order to avoid this embarrassment, Paul was sending an advance party to encourage them to get it together. I thought it necessary to exhort the brethren that they would go before unto you and make up beforehand your bounty in verse 5. He wanted the advance party to avoid the situation where a group of Macedonian believers discovered that the Corinthians hadn't done what they had intended or said they were going to do. So if the Corinthians only contributed when Paul came, it would be seen as a gift of coercion rather than a willing gift, whereas he wanted it to be ready as a matter of bounty and not as of covetousness, also in verse 5. The idea is that it would be something given out of a generous spirit rather than given grudgingly. These verses outline two important principles. Firstly, the need to do what we intend to do as a spiritual exercise, and secondly, the need to give out of a generous spirit. We should not need to be coerced to help our brethren and sisters when they are in need.